Welcome everyone to the Asher Marketing Podcast. We provide a wide range of services, including media planning, video production, creative solutions, digital and social media strategies, website development, public relations, and printing. To find out more, visit AsherAgency.com.
My guest is Elijah Stewart. Elijah, how you doing?
I'm doing great.
Thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks for having me.
It's been fun working with you for the last few months.
Yeah.
And it'll be really interesting to hear your story.
Yeah.
And part of that story is you have a 4-year-old and an 8-year-old.
I do.
So you're right in the middle of all of it.
There's so much that I'm in the middle of. Yes.
So the 4-year-old, is that preschool yet or not yet?
She's in Montessori, so it gets a little weird in the grades there, but she is in school, yes.
Okay. And the 8-year-old, I'm going to guess that's second grade?
She's in third grade.
Third grade, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Geez. So how is third grade going?
Great. We just got parent-teacher conferences back and the meetings and things like that.
Okay.
She's doing wonderful.
All
She's
right.
doing above expectations, which is great.
Excellent.
She doesn't get it from me. But
Well, good. Well,
does
good. Well, speaking of your path that you took, let's talk about your career path and some of the lessons you may pass on to your girls or some of the things you may not share with them. So you grew up in Columbia City.
Correct, yes.
And what were you originally thinking about when it came to work? Was that something that you knew early on what you wanted to do? Or did you have, like me, no idea until you kind of got going?
Sure, yeah. For me, I knew once I took some classes in high school that graphic design was really where I wanted to be. For me, graphic design is art, but it has rules. There's rules that you follow.
Yeah.
I do have a math brain.
Yeah.
So for me, that made a lot of sense. There's structure in how you create things. So graphic design really just kind of was the natural flow.
Yeah.
But it was between that, and again, I said I had a math side. It was between that or, honestly, engineering.
Really?
I really loved getting into the CAD stuff, but ended up going the art way.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Now, did you have other artistic interests growing up, or was it just graphic design?
No, I mean, I was drawing as a kid. I was doing all of this stuff. My mom had crafts all the time that we were doing. So artistic family for sure.
Okay.
So that was a natural bent. But then when graphic design, it was growing up, age of computers kind of thing. So it all kind of clicked for me there.
Well, and it's interesting because a lot of the folks I know who are older, who are graphic designers, it was definitely more art than science. But with the advent of graphic design in a technical field, it became as much science as anything else.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of folks who are kind of that fine line between, I like to fix problems. One of the problems I fix is message problems, and I do that through graphic design. So it sounds like that, you get a little bit of that in you. Yeah. So what did you do with that? Where did you go, let's say, after high school, and you say, okay, I'm becoming an adult. I need to figure this out.
Yeah.
Graphic design is a path. Where do you go from there?
Yeah. So the next thing for me was the obvious thing, college.
Yep.
Had a couple of different places I wanted to go. Didn't end up going to the first choice, and ended up Ivy Tech in Fort Wayne. They were, at that time, still pretty small. That new building, I call it new because I haven't seen it for a while, but they were building their big building out there while I was in portables inside of classrooms out on that site.
Yeah.
But ended up going to Ivy Tech and did that for a couple of years.
Yep.
And it just wasn't my thing. I was ready to kind of get on with life.
Yeah.
And it felt like really another task to be done. And I'm such a self-learner that I was like, all of this is available to me online.
Yeah.
So I don't want to spend any more money doing it this way. I'll just learn online and build my skills that way.
Yeah, and it's funny that path is so available today. There's a guy I know, I don't know if you know his name, Aaron Robles. Is that a name that's familiar to you? Aaron, same exact story.
Yeah.
Went to school, had a job as a graphic designer, and said, basically, people are paying me to learn. why would I pay someone to learn things that I'm already doing professionally?
Right.
And didn't complete his degree and has a very successful business now doing graphic design.
Yeah.
So it's, it's an age where if you have the discipline to be self-taught, you can do it. And so let's talk about that for just a second, because, a lot of people think, okay, if I'm going to go into marketing, I need a 4-year degree. That hasn't proven true for you. What do you think kids should be thinking about as they build a path, whether it's in marketing or anything else? Do you think, even though it wasn't for you, that college is still a better decision? Or do you think for some people, self-taught and taking a different path is okay?
Sure. No, that's a really good question. And the answer has morphed over the years because there was a little bit of me in rejection of the traditional method because I was able to do it a different way. And with the rising cost of education, which is a whole thing we won't get into, but it's becoming more and more expensive. I think ultimately, though, there's both are right. It really does come down to what is your discipline, what is the thing you want to study. You can't just go online, learn how to be a doctor, and then go, I'm a doctor. Like there's certain professions that you have to have those credentials.
Sure.
I will say that
you want your pilot to have credentials.
If you want to make it to your destination, you probably do. Yes. There is a much easier time, I think, when you do the traditional school route. There's a lot of places that won't even consider you because there's a job requirement of a degree, a 4-year bachelor's degree. In some fields, it's becoming that and then also a master's on top of it. And they just have an auto filter of if you don't have that on your resume, you're out. So it definitely makes the job pool a lot more broad. So if you don't do that, you just have to really be on top of your game, really have the motivation and the drive, and then prove that you can hang with them. And I was fortunate enough to have opportunities with my lack of education. People still gave me experience. And so for that, I'm grateful for sure.
So it sounds like you just wanted to get started with life pretty quickly, because you mentioned before we hit record, you got married at a young age. You started your career. You said, enough of this school. I just want to jump into my career. Has that always been true? You're just a naturally impatient person?
I think it's, there was a lot that happened in childhood that just caused me to grow up early. And so that awkward time when you're like, am I an adult? I'm 18, I'm supposed to be, but I don't feel like one. And there was just enough where I was like, I don't want to do the waiting anymore. Let's just get on with it.
Okay.
I've learned over time to slow down.
All right.
As I had kids, I'm slowing down.
So is there any regret there? Like, I wish I had explored more or been more of a, been not in such a rush, or are you glad that you rushed into it, so to speak?
There's no regret.
Okay, that's good. That's good. All right. So let's talk about your career, because you've worked in nonprofits pretty much from the start. Right? So you're in a church setting to start your career. Is that true?
Yep. Age 23.
How do you find yourself there?
Part of it was I've just always had a spiritual side and wanted to figure out what it looked like to work inside of a church. And had originally applied actually for another job. I have a musical background too, again, artistic. So I had applied for some music stuff, and they had kind of went on a different path there, but they said, we do have this other thing. And I was like, perfect. That's my other passion. I love art and graphic design, film, things like that. And so, at 23, they let me have that opportunity and then hung with it for a decade.
Wow. So it sounds like it was a good experience.
It was,
and yet you decided to make a change. So what precipitates that? Why do you take what is now comfortable after 10 years, you're probably doing pretty well, and you decide to completely upset the apple cart and go do something different? Why is that?
This is kind of like a therapy session now, because I think you're calling out something that I'm realizing. Am I impatient? There's 10 years of doing anything, and sometimes you just get bored. And we had taken on more employees at the church. What I used to do creatively had kind of gotten divided a little bit, and I was like, I don't know that I'm finding the joy in this anymore. So you couple that with then some experiences over COVID where I get to travel out to California, spend a whole week in this cabin in the mountains of the High Sierras out at Lake Tahoe. And I was like, this is great.
Yeah.
This is awesome. Why can't I do this every day?
Yeah.
Because it's expensive.
Yeah.
But that really struck a chord with me while we were out there. And me and my wife always, when we were before kids, we're always going out, camping, doing all this stuff. And so this interaction with nature and being out in these grand vistas, which most people, you go to the Grand Canyon, you're going to be inspired.
Yeah.
But doing that, I was like, okay, what is this that's stirring, and how do I incorporate my skill set, which is I'm not a mountaineer, but how do I take communication and telling people information and marry that with something like the outdoors?
Now, when you were having this epiphany, did you know of the opportunity at Acres, or did that come later?
I did not know of the opportunity at Acres. Nope. It was just one of those life moments where like something stirs and you go, maybe this is something, maybe it's nothing.
And was it anything specific that you can point to, or was it just a series of moments over the time you were there?
As far as the inspirational, there was a moment. Again, it wasn't like, this is the thing to do. But me and my wife had climbed up on these rocks and we were overlooking this lake. And I was just like, these places don't exist. They do, but they don't exist where I'm at. And I want special places like this where I'm at. And that was a kind of a sobering experience for me, because I didn't want to have to travel to clear across the country to experience things of beauty.
Yeah, well, and there's I'm going to misquote a song I really like, but there's places 20 minutes from home that you've never been that are pretty amazing, but the reason they're amazing is because we never go there. And it's like, if and I include myself in this, if we just kind of turn left instead of right, sometimes you can find some pretty amazing places.
Yeah.
So there was also something that I've stalked you a little bit online, as if you can't tell.
That's cool.
You're a little bit elusive because you're not on LinkedIn, so you have that going for you. But there was a moment with your girls at an Acres Preserve too. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so that was the first kind of actually introduction to Acres specifically for me. We had that experience out in California, and then I was trying to figure out, how do I give my girls this experience? For me, growing up, we lived woods were in the back of our house. We were out there all the time, and those were really formative experiences for me. My girls don't have that experience up until this point, because we're in a suburban neighborhood. There's houses all around, tiny backyard. And so how do I give them this experience? And so I was just like, what is incredible in Indiana within an hour of me? And there's the state parks. Like everybody goes to the state parks. But I wanted something that was a little bit more off the beaten path. And so I'm just Googling. Acres has great SEO, by the way. So I'm Googling, and this website says there's a waterfall down in Wabash County that's 50 minutes
I was just telling producer Nick about that. Yeah.
And I was like, well, if that is true, I don't believe it, but if it's true, let's go see it. And so we packed up that morning, and again, this was spur of the moment. So that morning we packed up and went out there, and we just had the most incredible time. There is a waterfall in Wabash County. It's beautiful.
And there are pillars too in Wabash County. And there's a hanging rock.
7 of them.
7 of them,
and there's a big old rock. But having that moment with them, and I remember one of my girls, as we're out along the banks of the river, it's butts up against Salamone. As we're out there, and she just goes, "This is the best day ever."
Oh, wow.
And I was like, oh, this is it.
Yeah.
This is the experience I was hoping to have.
Yeah.
And from that, I was like, what can we do to have this experience as a family? And then again, how can I be involved in something that has families have this experience? How can I wasn't protect at the time. That's my language now.
Yeah, sure.
But how can be a part of something that allows families to experience all of the world has to offer in this way?
Well, that's cool. So we've been talking about Acres, but my suspicion is some of the people listening to this either don't know what Acres is or misunderstand what Acres is.
Sure.
So from your perspective, how do you describe Acres to those who ask?
Yeah. It's hard because it depends on the person.
Yeah.
But most of the time, I'd just say that I work for an organization that helps keep special places special. And then if that's not enough, and they're like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
It's really about land protection, and there's a lot of land that's disappearing. And so acres exists to make sure that forests can stay forests instead of turning into more development. We're not anti-development, but
Sure.
trying to keep pace.
Yeah.
So just protect those and protect the unique special plants and animals that actually exist here in Indiana. Indiana, people don't know this, it actually has the most, more orchids than Hawaii, which I think claims that as their flower. There's interesting things about this place, and people don't know it. They think they have to go travel again to California and not 20 minutes down the road to find some really interesting places. And so acres just exist to make those places exist and in perpetuity. We say forever.
Yeah.
Which is a lofty claim.
Yeah, well, I mean, what I like about it, and I'm, again, stealing somebody else's idea, but I like the fact that you can be on an acres preserve or just, observe one from a distance.
Yeah.
And it's timeless in that the goal is to make it look like it would have looked like thousands of years ago, right? To bring it back to its natural state.
Yeah.
And that's especially, I've had a journey with technology, as many of us have, where, it's taken me 55 years, but it's like, my best days are the days when I am on screens the least. And there's fewer and fewer spaces where you can get away from all that. And acres preserves happen to be one of those, where if you choose, you can go back to a place that's kind of unspoiled by modern technology. Modern technology is great, but if you want to get away from it, it's one of the few places where you're not going to be confronted with it unless you confront yourself with it.
Yes.
Yeah. So a lot of people, myself up until recently included, confuse state parks, they confuse county parks, they confuse the trail system with acres. How do you delineate if somebody's like, well, Matea, is that an acres preserve? Well, of course the answer is no, but how do you make the distinction between what acres is and what all those other great spaces are?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's interesting when people even talk about acres, and these are people who do know us and have been a part of us for a while, sometimes they still use the word park.
Yeah.
Because that's what they're used to. But there's so many conservation groups. So acres is a conservation group. We protect land and conserve that land. There's so many different branches of conservation. So the state parks function as part of that. Yeah. But they're state run and state funded and owned. And then you have county parks, which again, a lot of those tend to be recreational and open for a lot of people. What we do is we protect land, and we have it's around 130 different properties that we protect in our region now, which is about 8,000 acres. Like we're up there. Yeah. But of those 130, only 32 are even open to the public. And the reason is, again, we're protecting sensitive plant communities that are endangered and could potentially go away. So we're trying to protect some of that. We're protecting things like a rattlesnake. Did you know we have rattlesnakes up here?
I did not.
I didn't either until I worked with acres, and then I got to see 2 of them on this property, and it was terrifying.
Is that which preserves would you find them, or do you not want to say because then people will go looking for them?
It's on a closed preserve, so we don't have that problem.
Got it.
We have articles about it. It's Grass Lake. It's a unique property. Yeah, we won't get into the details because it gets really technical.
Yeah, and it would all be over my head anyway. So good on you.
Mine too. But those kind of things exist, and so we're protecting that. When it comes to recreation, the state parks are doing a great job, and county parks are doing a great job. For us, we do like to inspire people. That's why we have open preserves where people can hike around. Again, go see a waterfall. But our main goal is protecting the things that are going away.
Yeah, and that took a while for me to get my head around because I have been involved with Fort Wayne Trails for the last decade, and the goal there is we want as many people on the trails as possible, and with acres it's kind of like we want some of that, but people can be competitive to our main mission of preserving this stuff. So balance. It's all about balance.
It's hard,
Yeah. So how does land find its way to acres? Is it primarily people leaving it to acres in their will, in their estate? Are there other ways that land finds its way to the organization?
Sure. Yeah. There's a couple of different ways. Sometimes we actively are looking for places. Yeah. We've come up with these, I don't know if they're unique to us, but there are these corridors that we're trying to protect. So for acres, one of the big ones is Cedar Creek. Mm-hmm. So Cedar Creek exists up north, and we protect about 100, or not 100, probably I think at this point 1,300 acres within that corridor.
Okay.
We have a concentrated effort in that area. So we're actively looking sometimes for plots of land that go for sale, and we may try to do some talking there. But most of the time, it really is like-minded people who are like, I have this piece of property and I don't want to see anything else happen to it.
Yeah.
A lot of times, memories are attached to these places. Lots of memories of great-grandfathers and things like that.
Yeah.
And I don't want to see that go away, and I don't want to see it just get torn down and put a parking lot up. So I want to protect that. What's an organization that can do that? It's acres. And a lot of times they'll kind of leave it. They'll live, put it in their will. We'll see it afterwards.
Yeah.
A lot of times too, we have what's called like a life estate. Mm-hmm. So they'll donate it to acres. They still live on the property, live in the home, but we're managing the property for them in the meantime.
Okay.
But it really is, it's incredible, because I think a lot of people think we go out and we're just buying and up all of this stuff, but we couldn't do what we do if it wasn't for like-minded people wanting to protect the places with us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what are some of if someone doesn't have the means or ability to donate property to acres, what are some of the ways people can get involved to help acres achieve its mission, to be part of it? What are some of the different things people can do to experience acres other than visiting a preserve?
Yeah. And again, visit a preserve. Yeah. Please do.
It is great. I mean, I really enjoy it every time I do it. I haven't been to most of the preserves, but there's ones I've gone to multiple times. And what I like is the variety.
Yeah.
There's one not far from my home. It's right off Stellahorn, and it's relatively small, but it's super quiet for where it is.
Yep.
And then there's the ones in Wabash with waterfalls and all those things.
Yeah.
So in addition to that, what are some good ways for people who maybe have never experienced acres, good ways to get started?
We're hitting pause for just a moment to talk about something that can transform your online presence: Asher Agency and their exceptional website services. In today's digital world, your website is often the first impression potential customers have of your business. Is yours making the right impact? At Asher, we specialize in creating stunning, custom, user-friendly websites that not only look great, but also drive results. Visit asheragency.com for more info.
Yeah, so we try to offer a lot of events for people to kind of come out and just get a sense of what it is that we do. At Acres, we know that people join us because they want to protect, or they care about the natural spaces.
Yeah.
But why they care might be a vast array of things. Some people like the science. Some people do just like hiking. Some people really care about animals and want to keep their habitat protected. So all of these different things come into this web that we have. And that makes up why Acres exists and the people who support Acres. So we try to have events that then kind of capitalize on some of that. So we've started up family play days. My experience with my girls, that was a self-made play day of get out into nature. But we try to provide an easy access opportunity for families to drag their kids out, make some trail mix, have somebody lead you on a hike, and just go, this is cool, right?
Yeah.
So we have things like that. This past summer, we try to do just a barn concert series. So just free concert, come out, hang out on a nature preserve, walk the trails. Again, when people get out into nature, then they get inspired by it. And when they're inspired, then their deep core motivations, their like core memories start to form inside of that, of like, why do I care about this place? Is it beautiful? Is it because I saw a cool bird? You get birders out of that. I need a pair of binoculars to see this bird closer. It happens as you get older. I'm starting to become one. And I always thought,
if you're starting to become one, I don't even know what I'm becoming. Yeah, all right.
who looks at birds all day? I'm starting to.
Yeah.
But events are a great way to do that, experience a little bit of who we are, and come out to something that interests you. Don't interact in a way that doesn't. We have something for if you want to learn how to identify trees just by their bark and without the leaves. There's a thing for you.
Yeah.
So we really try to get people to get interested in acres that way. And then it really is after that just, okay, you think that this is valuable. So now what is your action step? What are you going to do? For us, it's we operate, we're a nonprofit, we operate off of donations and funds that way. And we are largely member and donors supported when it comes to funding.
Yeah.
And so to become a member of Acres, to get some like exclusive access to some of those more special events, $20 a year, you're a member of Acres.
Yeah, that's always amazed me at how low the entry point is.
Yeah.
I mean, my original experience with Acres, and I'll be honest, what originally attracted me to Acres was some of the most interesting people I knew kept talking about this organization, and they were from different walks of life. And I was like, if all these really cool people think this is cool, maybe I should too. And visited a couple of preserves, and I was like, this is great, but I don't have $1 million. I don't have property. And then, I intersected with, it's $20. That's nothing, right? So really great way to be part of it and feel like something, much larger than yourself at a very low entry point.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, because it's a hard thing with membership for Acres. All of the open preserves that we have, like we'll get calls all the time, like, what is the cost of entry? They're used to different kinds of parks or things like that. It's free and open to the public. The thing I think people don't understand with Acres preserves is that it's still private land. It's still land that Acres owns. It's not public space. And so people have to interact with them a little differently. But they are free and open to the public as long as you're there when the sun's up. Don't go camping in an Acres preserve.
Well, and the other thing that has fascinated me over the years is the wildly different walks of life that get people involved in Acres. There's some people who come at it from a very spiritual perspective, some people from a very environmental perspective, some from a very scientific perspective. And it's kind of a cool way where those different walks of life intermingle and all have kind of a common purpose, which is pretty great.
Yeah, it amazes me the people that I run into and the people that I continue to meet. I've been at Acres for a little over a year, so I'm still meeting like core people. And I'm like, I would not know you if it wasn't for our shared connection in this, because everything else does not connect. But I love that. And I do love that collectively as an organization, somehow we've got a bunch of different people with a bunch of different backgrounds who all get along for this core purpose of we just want to see nature protected.
Well, and the world needs more of that right now, for
Holy
sure.
cow.
We're not going to solve that. So
Not here.
So what are some of the specific things, and obviously if there's something secret, don't feel like you have to talk about it, but what are some of the things you're working on that are at the top of your to-do list, maybe keeping you up at night, maybe making you excited, maybe all of those things?
This is going to be a big, vague answer, but what's really hard with Acres is the scope of our work is not. It's infinite, and it doesn't exist on our timelines a lot of times. So we are constantly working on new projects. We have people who are wanting to donate their land to us. We work with people for over 30 years to make that happen. And so there's multiple staff members involved in some of that. That being said, there are some hopeful 30-year projects that we're hoping to see some finality to. We just recently finished up a project that was like 10 years worth of work. And so it's hard to say, here's what's on the horizon, because sometimes they just come to us. And sometimes we've been working on them for a long, long time. And it's hard to get people to think in terms of centuries rather than decades. Because that's the scope of what we do.
Yeah, for sure. So this is going to be a potentially stupid question.
Please ask.
And it may have an obvious answer, but I assume all of this has gotten more difficult with the rapid growth in Northeast Indiana. And, you're seeing huge swaths of farmland go to new subdivisions out of need. People need a place to live.
Sure, yeah.
Has it gotten more difficult to preserve those spaces?
Yeah, what we're finding is the act of preserving is not hard.
Yeah.
When we find people who, I'll back that up in a minute. When we find people who want to donate land, that part's still easy.
Yeah.
The rate at which there's been some growth and expansion and development has accelerated our needs. Our number one biggest obstacle when it comes to all of it is actually funding. I think there's a misconception that we're just waiting for people to like, well, maybe here's some land, and then we go, yes, please. For every property that we protect, we have to turn away 4 other properties that we want to say yes to.
Wow.
So it literally, like, people are constantly coming to us, and that is accelerating too, because people are seeing around them, like, that used to be Smith's farm, and now there's a bunch of houses back there. I never thought it would be that.
So when Acres says no, is it because it's not a good fit for the mission, because of the costs involved in maintaining, preserving that land, or is it a combination of those things?
It's there are times where it's like, hey, this isn't really kind of what we do, what you're looking for. We don't specialize in farmland. So we have partner organizations that we work with, and we'll bounce people around. And it's not even really the cost of maintaining. We've got that down to a science too. It's really just the cost of acquisition. So I'm not even going to speak on what an acre costs now, but we just kind of did our strategic plan. And then as we projected out over 4 years, we're like, okay, let's increase this budget by X million dollars, and that'll cover it. But the cost of acre is going to go up too, and so we're actually not gaining any ground. So really, it's not even the cost associated with maintaining; it's the cost associated with acquisition. Especially on the people who don't want to donate. They want something for their land, and probably deserve it too.
Understandably. Hard to argue with.
I get it. I get it.
Well, let's pivot to a few quick hit questions, some things you've alluded to, but that I'd like to hear a little bit more on. And one is career advice. You've had a very successful career after taking an unconventional path, right? What is your advice in terms of what you think it takes to build a fulfilling, successful career? If you were talking to one of your girls about, how they may make their way, or anyone for that matter, what would you say?
I will preach this until I am in the ground. I think the number one thing is never stop learning. No matter what you're doing, never stop learning. I know so many people who do, again, a traditional college path. They may go on to get a master's, but then they stop. And they go, I've achieved the thing. And so your career is just starting. Like, you got another 30 years. And technology, AI is a big thing right now. The innovation that's happening so quickly, you got to stay on top of stuff. And so if you don't continue to learn in whatever your field is, you're going to be left behind.
The example I always give, and this is going to make me sound like a dinosaur because I am, my first post-college job, I did not have an email address, and the company did not have a website because those things didn't exist. And that's 30 years ago, but it's not all that long ago.
You were like papyrus and quill.
I was just, smoke signals. But you're right. I think that's important. And the other thing I would add that I'm kind of appreciating more as I get older is learning from people who aren't from the same walk of life that you're from.
For sure.
That everybody knows stuff. My neighbor, Jacob Huffam, is an arborist, right? Forester. I always call him an arborist, but he's a forester. And that's East Coast, West Coast. So, and he knows more about a subject that I know about most subjects, and it makes me realize how little I know about anything. So you can learn something from anyone, but you gotta admit your ignorance, and that's becoming easier for me to do as I get older.
Which is good, because it's hard for a lot of people.
Yeah, for sure. All right, second quick hit question. What is a myth or misconception about your work that you'd like to clear up, or something that you think doesn't get enough attention that maybe you want to amplify? And that can be about Acres, it can be about the nonprofit sector, it can be about your work as a marketer. What's something you think deserves to be debunked or amplified?
Yeah, that's a big question.
We don't ask small questions here, Elijah.
Let's go with nonprofit.
Yeah.
Because I've been in a couple of nonprofits now.
Yeah.
And this is it's probably a little bit soapboxy. Nonprofits can get a bad rap. They're established for good reasons.
Yeah.
But then when it comes to funding, there's always questions of where's the money being distributed. And the larger that an organization gets, it does appear from any point of view that funding tends to go in places, and they're like, is this going to the people or not?
Yeah.
One of the things that I really appreciate in the places that I've been is that everybody who's working in these nonprofit fields are not in it for the money.
Yeah.
And are most of the time underpaid for what they're qualified for.
Yeah.
But they're so passionate about their work that they're willing to take the hit in salary and living comfortably because they want to see the change happen that they're working for.
Yeah.
And I think I just think nonprofits really get a bad rap, and some of it's justified for sure. I mean, we all can point at examples, but there's a lot of really good people doing hard work. And I mean, there's a statistic out there that it's like 18 months in nonprofit before people get burned out and churned out.
Yeah.
And it's because it's just a hard work to get into.
Yeah. Well, and I can say this with some confidence. I haven't met everyone at Acres, but everyone I've come in contact with seems really bought into the mission.
Yeah.
It's like they're there because they really care.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like they'd be doing this in some form even if it wasn't the job they were getting paid to do.
Yeah.
And that's kind of great.
Yeah. Most people I know have volunteered or whatever before they've been able to do the job.
Yeah.
And I love that, rather than waiting to I'm going to do good things and then get paid for it, rather than like, I'll do good when I get paid.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, one last quick hit question. We talked about, continuing to learn and technology and all that. And marketing has gotten infinitely more complex over the last even few years.
Yeah.
How do you, what's a tool or a trick or a tip or a hack or an app, doesn't have to be digital, that you use that helps you get the job done that you think is important and worth a mention?
Yeah, this is going to be controversial depending on where people fall. But my supervisor recently came back from a conference, and they talked about the ways to utilize AI. We do a lot of grant writing. There's a lot of just communication in general that happens with us. And what are some, not letting it do the entire thing for us, but how can we work with these tools to cut the time of spending 3 days writing a grant down to a day? For us, time really is money. The more grants that we can secure, the more money that we can generate to protect places. So we're really trying to step into that AI space, but it's really tricky, even for us. Like, there are people who see the places, they don't believe these places exist in Indiana. And then they see some amazing photos from like our photographers. And AI has everybody suspicious, so they're like, that's not real. You're like, man, I wish that you knew that it was. And it gets tricky even with like, especially image manipulation. Photoshop does a great job. Generative fill. It's going to fill it with some plants that may not even exist. And you know what happens? I work for an organization where a lot of people know their plants, and they go, "That's not a thing."
Yeah.
Oh, so there's some ethics that we're working through inside of that too. But they're amazing tools that, when utilized as generative and assistive, are game changing and time saving for us. Yeah.
Well, I think that's really smart. And what I would encourage people to do, I suspect most of the people who are listening to this are at least, have some favorable thoughts towards AI.
Sure.
But it's like any other tool. For the other day, I asked my wife for somebody's address, and she screenshot it on her phone and sent it to me as a text. I dropped it into ChatGPT, and I said, extract the text from this. And I don't know if I'm just naive. I don't know if it's because I'm a child of the 70s. I was just fascinated by the fact that it saved me all those keystrokes, right? So if you use it as a tool in that way to take away the sort of inane tasks that are just taking time, they're not adding any value, I think that's only good. The rest of it, there's a lot up for debate, but it's something that I encourage people, don't shy away from it so much that you get left behind.
Yeah.
At least become educated about it, learn the pros and the cons, and try stuff, experiment.
Yeah.
And then if you still have a wholly negative opinion, that's fair, but to just say these tools are evil and they're going to destroy humanity is probably a little overstated.
It's a lot overstated. And your opinion is at least informed at that point.
Exactly.
Which is what's really important.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, and people now are informed about acres thanks to you.
What a transition. Wow.
Hey, I've been doing this for 4 years. If I can't figure that out, then I guess I'm not going to use this. Well, thanks for doing this. This has been fun.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
And thanks to everyone who took the opportunity to listen to this episode of the Asher Marketing Podcast. We'll be back next time with another great guest, and we hope you'll join us then.
We'd love to hear your feedback. Feel free to reach out to us at hello@asheragency.com. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to our show on your favorite podcast platform. It really helps us reach more listeners. For additional resources and updates, visit our website at asheragency.com. Thanks for tuning in.